So I want to start today with a bit of a thought experiment. It's a little uncomfortable, but just stick with me for a second. Imagine you wake up tomorrow, you reach for your phone to check your banking app, and the number on the screen is just zero.
Oof. Yep.
Or maybe even worse, the number is still there. Let's say it's $1 million. But when you walk down the street to buy a loaf of bread, the price tag says $100.
Right. It sounds like the opening scene of some dystopian sci-fi thriller.
Exactly.
But the reality is, for a huge portion of the human population throughout history, that hasn't been fiction at all. That's just been, a Tuesday.
It's the ultimate nightmare scenario. And usually, especially here in America, we just brush this off. We tend to think, well, that happens in other places, right? Our money is solid. But recently, there's been this signal flashing on the global economic dashboard that suggests maybe we shouldn't be so comfortable.
Hmm.
And I'm talking about gold.
The old barbaric relic.
Right, the shiny yellow rock, specifically the price of it, because
Yeah.
we've seen gold completely shatter records recently. It break through 2,400, then 2,600, and it's just marching toward $3,000 an ounce. And when you look at the charts, this isn't just a little blip. It literally looks like a rocket launch.
It really does.
Yeah.
And when you see a macroeconomic move like that, you have to stop and ask the fundamental question. Is gold actually becoming more valuable? Like, did the metal itself suddenly become more useful or rarer overnight?
Right.
Or is the ruler that we use to measure it, the US dollar, is the ruler just shrinking?
And that is the exact question we are tackling in this deep dive. Because the sources we're looking at today are pointing to the fact that this isn't just some standard commodity trading trend. This is a massive structural shift in how the world views money.
Absolutely.
So we're going to talk about the physics of it. We're going to dive into this old banker's trick from the Middle Ages. And we're definitely going to talk about why global central banks are suddenly hoarding gold like dragons right now.
Yeah, and we really need to start with the catalyst for all of this. Because obviously gold has been around forever, but something very specific happened back in 2022 that completely changed the psychology of the global financial system.
You're talking about the fallout from the Russia and Ukraine conflict?
Specifically the financial sanctions. Now, obviously we're putting aside the politics of the war here. We aren't here to debate right or wrong on the geopolitical stage. We just need to look at the pure mechanics of what actually happened.
Right.
The U.S. and its allies froze the Russian central bank's foreign reserves.
Let's actually unpack that for a second, because it's wild. Russia had hundreds of billions of dollars saved up just sitting in Western banks, and literally with the push of a button, the West just said, you can't touch this.
Exactly. Our sources call it a financial nuclear weapon, because for decades, the entire selling point of the U.S. dollar, and the euro too, was neutrality. The implicit agreement was always, hey, we might not like your regime, but your money is safe here. And in 2022, that promise was essentially broken. The message that's sent to the rest of the world, to places like Brazil, Saudi Arabia, China, it was absolutely chilling.
Because it basically said, if you keep your national wealth in our currency, it isn't truly yours. It's yours only as long as you play by our rules.
Right. It's the ultimate counterparty risk. If you're a sovereign nation and you suddenly realize that your entire national savings account can be frozen by a foreign power over the weekend, what do?
You panic.
You panic, and then you trigger what our research describes as a financial evacuation. You look for an asset that has no off switch.
Yep.
You need the only financial asset on the planet that isn't simultaneously someone else's liability.
Which is gold.
Yeah.
Because nobody in Washington or London can freeze a physical gold bar if it's sitting in your own vault in Mumbai or Shanghai.
Precisely. You don't need a password. You don't need the SWIFT network. You don't even need the internet. And most importantly, you don't need the U.S. government's permission to own it.
Right.
That specific realization is what lit the massive fire under the price of gold recently. But to really understand why gold is the chosen one for this role, we actually have to go way, way back, not just to 2022, but to the actual formation of the Earth.
Yeah, the physics section of the sources was honestly my favorite part of the research, because I think most people, myself included, kind of just assume gold is, well, it's just in the ground. Like, the Earth simply makes it, like, it makes coal or quartz.
Right, but the Earth can't make it. That's the wild part. If you think of the Earth as this giant geological kitchen, it can cook up all sorts of amazing things. It can crush carbon into diamonds. It can create complex biological life. But its oven simply isn't hot enough to bake gold.
So where does it come from?
It is literally an alien import. Gold is stardust. It's only created during the most violently energetic events in the known universe, We're talking about supernovas, which are exploding stars, or even more intensely, the collision of two neutron stars.
And neutron stars are the ones that are just incredibly dense, right?
Incomprehensibly dense. Like a single teaspoon of neutron star material would weigh as much as Mount Everest.
Wow.
So when two of these massive things slam into each other in space, the heat and pressure are so extreme that they literally force loose neutrons into atomic nuclei. Physicists call it rapid neutron capture, or the R process.
An R process.
Right. Yeah. And that cosmic explosion sprays this fine gold dust out into the vacuum of space.
And then eventually, over billions of years, some of that dust got caught in the swirl of gravity that formed our solar system and basically just clumped into the Earth.
Exactly. And here's the kicker. Because gold is so heavy, it's more than twice as dense as iron. When the Earth was still essentially just a molten ball of lava, almost all of that original gold sank straight down to the core.
Oh, right, because it's so dense.
Yep. So the gold we actually mine today near the surface is just a tiny accidental dusting that managed to get stuck in the crust or it arrived on later meteorites crashing into the planet.
Which perfectly explains why it is so unbelievably scarce. I mean, the visualization in the notes completely blew my mind. It said if you took every single ounce of gold ever mined in all of human history, so every pharaoh's mask, every Roman coin, every wedding ring, every bullion bar in Fort Knox, and you melted it all down into one solid giant cube.
It would fit in about 3 standard Olympic-sized swimming pools.
That's crazy.
That is it. That represents thousands and thousands of years of human effort. Just 3 pools. When you compare that to something like copper or iron, where we literally have entire mountains of the stuff, you start to get a sense of the true scarcity.
But scarcity isn't the only reason we chose it as money, right? I mean, a lot of elements are rare. Polonium is rare, but we don't carry that around to buy groceries. The sources list these natural cheats that gold has, these specific properties that just make it the perfect medium for trade.
Yeah, it really is a chemical miracle. The biggest one is immortality. Gold is totally chemically inert. It basically refuses to bond with oxygen.
So it doesn't rust.
Never. If you bury a pile of iron swords, you come back in 1,000 years, you just have a pile of reddish dust. But if you bury a gold coin, you can dig it up 3 millennia later, wipe the mud off on your shirt, and it shines exactly like the day it was minted.
King Tut's mask is the perfect example. It looks brand new. It effectively freezes your wealth, your stored labor, in time.
Exactly. And then there's the visual aspect, which actually comes down to quantum mechanics. Most metals look silvery or gray to us because they reflect all light equally. But gold has this really unique electron structure. It absorbs blue light and reflects yellow and red.
So to early humans, it literally looked like a physical piece of the sun.
Right. It was distinct, it was beautiful, and crucially, it was malleable enough to easily stamp into coins, but durable enough to basically last forever.
Yeah.
It was just the perfect immutable ledger for human trade.
Okay, so we have this cosmic, indestructible golden metal. How did we go from physically handing each other gold coins to, well, where we are now, tapping a plastic card on a screen and essentially creating money out of thin air? How did we completely break the link to physical reality?
This is the story of the banker's trick. And the funny thing is, it didn't actually start as some grand evil conspiracy. It started entirely out of convenience.
Because carrying around heavy bags of metal is annoying and dangerous.
Highly dangerous. You can get robbed on the road. So back in the Middle Ages, people started taking their gold and depositing it with local goldsmiths for safekeeping.
Right, because the goldsmith already had a secure vault. So you give him your heavy gold and he gives you a little paper receipt.
Exactly. The receipt just says, this paper entitles the bearer to 1 ounce of gold. Very simple, very honest. But then human nature took over. People quickly realized, hey, I don't need to walk all the way back to the vault to get the gold just to pay you for this horse. I could just hand you the receipt.
Because the paper represented the gold, the paper receipt essentially became the money.
Yes. And meanwhile, the goldsmiths are sitting there guarding these vaults.
Yeah.
And they start to notice something interesting. Nobody ever actually comes back to get the physical metal.
You just keep trading the paper.
Right. That was the massive aha moment in financial history. The goldsmiths thought, well, if only 1 person in 10 ever comes to withdraw their gold at any given time, why don't I just write out a few extra paper receipts and lend them out to people to earn some interest?
Wait, so they were issuing receipts for gold that literally did not exist in the vault.
They were creating money entirely out of thin air. This is the absolute birth of fractional reserve banking.
Wow.
And as long as everyone didn't panic and try to come back for their physical gold at the exact same time, the goldsmith got super rich.
Yeah.
And the local economy actually benefited from having more liquidity.
But if they did come back all at once.
Then the whole system instantly collapses. That is what a bank run is.
Yeah.
And this underlying dynamic, this massive temptation to always print more paper receipts than there is actual gold in the vault, it has plagued literally every single economy in recorded history.
Which naturally brings us up to the 20th century. Because eventually governments stepped in and essentially said, okay, we are going to run the printing press now, but we promise to keep enough gold in our national vaults to back it all up.
The gold standard.
Right.
And it was supposed to be a strict discipline mechanism, because if every single dollar has to be backed by a set amount of physical gold, the government can't just print infinite money to pay for whatever they want, whether that's foreign wars or massive domestic social programs. They are firmly constrained by physical reality.
But historically speaking, politicians absolutely hate constraints.
They despise them, especially when they have a war to fight. And that tension finally exploded in the 1960s. So we were operating under the Bretton Woods system after World War II. The U.S. dollar was the undisputed king of the world, and it was firmly pegged to gold at $35 an ounce. Every other currency was pegged to the dollar.
But the U.S. was spending an unbelievable amount of money at the time on the Vietnam War, plus all of LBJ's Great Society programs at home. They were printing way, way more paper dollars than they had gold in Fort Knox to back up.
They were pulling the exact same medieval goldsmith's trick, just on a massive global scale.
And the French figured it out.
They did. French President Charles de Gaulle basically looked at the international accounting math and said this is a total scam.
Yeah.
So in a move that honestly feels like it belongs in a heist movie, France actually sent military warships, the French Navy, into New York Harbor.
I love this detail so much. It's such a boss move.
It really is. They literally pulled up and demanded to trade their paper U.S. dollars for physical American gold bars, loaded them onto the ships, and took them back to Paris.
They called our bluff. They said, I don't want your paper promises anymore. Hand over the metal.
Exactly. And once France did it, other countries started following suit. The U.S. gold reserves were just bleeding out at an incredibly alarming rate. President Nixon was totally cornered. He basically had to choose between two terrible options: stop the government spending and cause a massive, brutal domestic recession, or totally change the fundamental rules of the global financial game.
And so on August 15th, 1971, he changed the rules.
The Nixon shock.
Yeah.
He went on national television and announced that he was, quote, temporarily suspending the convertibility of the dollar into gold.
Temporarily. I mean, it's been over 50 years now.
Yeah, the longest temporary measure in history. But that specific moment birthed the entire financial world we live in today. It started the era of pure fiat money.
Fiat is Latin for let it be done, right?
Yes, by decree. The dollar in your wallet today has value not because it's a claim on a physical piece of cosmic stardust, but simply because the government says it does and demands you pay your taxes in it. It is entirely unmoored from physical reality. There's no limit to how much can be printed.
And this is where I think we really need to draw a sharp line for everyone listening, because we need to talk about the difference between money and currency. In casual, everyday conversation, we use those two words interchangeably. But economically speaking, the sources point out they are completely different beasts.
Oh, crucially different. Current, like the physical $20 bill in your pocket, is a medium of exchange. It's portable. You can divide it up. It's fungible. It's fantastic for buying a cup of coffee. But true money has to be a reliable store of value over a long period of time. That has to preserve your purchasing power into the future.
The sources gave this amazing example called the suit analogy to explain this. And honestly, I think it's the clearest way to actually understand inflation.
It's a perfect illustration. Let's go back a little over a century to the early 1900s. Back then, a 1-ounce gold coin had a face value of $20. For that single $20 gold piece, you could walk into a high-end tailor and buy a really nice, top-tier, custom-made suit.
Okay, so 1 ounce of gold equals one nice suit. Now, fast forward 100 years to today. That exact same 1-ounce gold coin is currently trading on the market for, let's say, over $2,600.
And guess what? For $2,600 today, you can still walk into a luxury tailor and buy a really nice top-tier custom-made suit. The gold preserved its purchasing power perfectly over a century. It buys the exact same amount of human labor and fine materials today as it did back then.
But what about the paper $20 bill from 1920?
Right, that paper $20 bill. Today, it barely buys you a decent sandwich and a coffee. That is the silent theft of inflation. The gold didn't actually get more expensive. The currency just got massively weaker.
The other analogy in the research that really hit home for me was the leaky bucket.
Yeah, think of your life savings like water sitting in a bucket. Inflation is a hole drilled in the bottom of that bucket. Every time the government prints more money, increasing the total supply of those paper receipts, they're actively diluting the value of every single dollar you already worked hard for. It's essentially a hidden tax that nobody ever voted for, and it just constantly drains your wealth while you're sleeping. Right. Now, normally there's a traditional check on the price of gold, right? It's tied to interest rates. Correct. The standard economic rule of real interest rates. Look, gold pays you absolutely nothing to hold it. It yields zero. There are no corporate dividends, no monthly interest payments. It just sits there being shiny. So logically speaking, when banks offer really high interest rates like the 5% we've seen on savings accounts recently, people usually sell their gold and put their cash in the bank. I mean, why hold a static rock when you can make a guaranteed risk-free 5% return in fiat?
But that is not what is happening right now. The Fed raised rates to the absolute sky to fight off inflation, and gold didn't crash at all. It actually hit all-time highs. That completely breaks the traditional economic model. Why is that happening?
This is the massive anomaly that has global economic experts so incredibly worried right now. Gold rising steadily despite high interest rates tells us that the global market is no longer moving based on standard spreadsheet economics. It's moving based on pure fear.
Wow.
Major global investors are actively willing to give up that easy 5% fiat profit just to be physically safe. They are fundamentally worried about the actual solvency of the underlying fiat system itself.
So who exactly is doing all this buying? Is it just nervous retail investors or preppers?
Yeah, no, not at all. Western retail investors have actually been selling. The ones buying are the absolute whales, the central banks themselves. For decades, Western central banks were actually net sellers of their gold reserves. They really did think it was just a useless historical relic. But right now, central banks aggressively led by China, but also Poland, Singapore, India, Turkey, they're buying physical gold at a staggering pace that we haven't seen in over 50 years. We're talking over 1,000 tons a year.
Wait, why are countries like Poland and Singapore, who are strong U.S. allies, suddenly loading up on gold?
It goes directly back to three massive drivers. First is de-dollarization. They all watched what happened to Russia's reserves.
Okay.
Even if they are allies now, they want an independent Tier 1 asset that absolutely cannot be sanctioned or frozen by Washington.
No counterparty risk.
Exactly. The second reason is systemic fragility. These central bankers aren't stupid. They see the structural cracks forming. They watched a massive institution like Silicon Valley Bank totally collapse over a single weekend. They look at the $300 trillion global debt bubble. They know, just mathematically speaking, that level of debt can never actually be paid back in real, undebased terms.
So they're essentially just buying systemic insurance against a total collapse.
Spot on. And the third driver is geopolitics. We are clearly rapidly entering a multipolar world again. If global supply chains start breaking down and heavy trade wars kick off, you desperately need a neutral, universally accepted currency to trade with. Gold is the universal language of value. Always has been.
There's this really vivid image in the text about a rubber band.
Yeah, imagine the entire modern fiat money system as a giant rubber band. Ever since Nixon shocked the world in 1971, we have been constantly stretching it. We stretch it by printing trillions of new dollars out of thin air. We stretch it by artificially suppressing interest rates for a decade. We stretch it by constantly bailing out failing banks. The further you stretch that band away from the anchor of physical reality, the more violent tension builds up in the system.
And eventually, physics always wins.
Eventually, it snaps. And when a rubber band snaps, it violently recoils right back to its anchor. Gold is the anchor. The central banks of the world are buying right now because they can physically hear the rubber band groaning.
Okay, that is a pretty heavy picture we've painted here. We've got a weaponized U.S. dollar, a mathematically unpayable global debt bubble, and central banks quietly building massive fortresses of physical gold. So let's pivot this directly to you, the listener. What does the average American investor actually do with all this information? Do we panic? Do we just sell the house and go buy a chest of bullion?
No, absolutely not. Honestly, panic is the ultimate enemy of wealth generation. The sources are very, very specific on this point. You do not buy gold to get rich. You buy gold so you don't get poor.
That is a massive distinction. Can you explain the opportunity cost aspect of that?
Sure. If you take all your money and bury it in gold bars, you are entirely missing out on the greatest wealth-generating engine in history. Human capitalism. Companies like Apple or Amazon or local small businesses, they actually create new value. They innovate, they produce cash flow, they pay out dividends. Historically speaking, the S&P 500 has massively outperformed gold in generating real wealth because gold just sits there in the dark. It isn't a growth investment, it is strictly insurance.
Right. It's basically fire insurance for your financial portfolio.
Exactly. You don't buy fire insurance on your house hoping that your house actually burns down so you can finally get a big check. You buy it so that if the absolute worst case disaster happens, you and your family aren't completely wiped out.
So what's the actual practical strategy here? What's the recommended number?
Most prudent financial sources and advisors suggest a conservative allocation of maybe 5 to 10% of your overall net worth. It acts as a permanent hedge. If the broader economy is booming, your stocks go way up, and your gold might just trade sideways or do nothing. And that's perfectly fine. But if we actually hit a severe systemic crisis, if that rubber band finally snaps, your stock portfolio might crash hard, but your gold allocation will likely skyrocket, balancing out the overall damage to your life savings.
Now let's talk about the actual mechanics. How does someone actively go about buying it? Because it seems like there's paper gold and then there's the real stuff.
Yeah, this is where the specific details really matter. For most everyday people, the easiest way is buying gold ETFs, exchange-traded funds. It's super convenient. You just click a button on your brokerage app, and you instantly have exposure to the price of gold. But technically speaking, you don't actually own any physical gold. You just own a paper share in a trust that supposedly holds the gold.
Which honestly just brings us right back to counterparty risk.
Exactly. If the broader financial system seizes up, if the power grid goes down, or
Right.
the fund managers mismanage the underlying assets, you just have a digital paper claim. That's why the purest advice, especially if you're genuinely worried about a severe systemic break, is to hold the physical metal yourself.
Like actual coins and bars in a safe.
Right. American Gold Eagles, Canadian Maple Leafs, tangible physical assets. Because if you physically hold it in your own hand, you completely eliminate the banking system, the internet, and the government from the equation entirely. It represents the ultimate form of financial privacy and sovereign control.
It's essentially about aggressively opting out of the trust me system.
It really is. It's taking your hard-earned labor and storing it in a battery that absolutely refuses to leak.
So just to kind of wrap this all up, we've gone on a huge journey today. From the violent collision of neutron stars creating this magical metal in the cosmos, to the sneaky paper receipts of the medieval goldsmiths, to Nixon permanently closing the gold window, and now to this massive modern rush by sovereign central banks, it really does feel like we are currently living through a major history book chapter that just hasn't been completely written yet.
I think that's exactly the right way to look at it. The official window to freely exchange dollars for gold was slammed shut in 1971. But the free market and the powerful nations of the world are actively forcing that window back open right now. They aren't listening to what politicians say, they're voting with their wallets. Or rather, they're voting with their vaults.
The US dollar has essentially been the bright sun of the global financial solar system for 80 years now. But orbits eventually decay.
They always do. And while none of us can control what the Federal Reserve does tomorrow or what wild geopolitics brings next year, we absolutely can control our own personal household economy. We get to decide exactly how much insurance we need to sleep soundly at night.
And I think that's the ultimate takeaway here. It's not about giving in to fear, it's about rational preparation. It's understanding that modern fiat money isn't just paper, it's entirely based on trust. And historically, whenever trust erodes, gold shines the brightest. But I want to leave you with one final thought that really wasn't explicitly covered in the sources, but it's worth mulling over. What if this current gold rush isn't just a defensive hedge against a dying dollar? What if these massive central banks are actually accumulating all this metal to back an entirely new digital financial system, like a gold-backed central bank digital currency? If that happens, the rules of money aren't just changing, they're being entirely rewritten from scratch.
Now that is a truly fascinating scenario to keep an eye on. Stay curious and maybe take a second look at what's actually sitting in your wallet today.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll catch you on the next one.